throughout the whole year of 2026. So if this is your first workshop with us, welcome. If it's your second or third, um, I'm glad you're back. We are going to be doing this series of different topics throughout the whole year. So if you contact the in Nevada SBDC, they'll be able to help you find these different workshops as well. So if you guys have any questions or anything throughout the event, just go ahead and write them in the chat and I'll interrupt Marissa and see if I can get her to answer those. And if it's something we can't answer today, we'll get back with you in an email. So if you need anything after this, we will have a QR code at the end or a link that you can request additional assistance or additional questions outside of this scope. So if it's something legal and you'd like to talk to somebody on our team, we can assist you with that as well. You just need to sign up through the SBDC group, and then they'll route you our way. So, any questions or anything like that, just let us know in the chat. And everyone, welcome to the event.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. So, hi, everybody. Like Karen said, my name is Marissa Weatherly. I will be presenting to you today about business legal topics. So, throughout this presentation, it's really going to be educational, informative, interactive. I encourage you to ask questions. You can put them in the chat. We will also have some Q&A at the end and some scenarios. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys and just make sure that you're aware of what are resources and information that you should know and have in your back pocket about your business. Okay, so I'm gonna start to share my screen, and then let me know if you're all able to see it. Okay. Okay. All right, can we see my screen, everyone? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to get started. So the title of this presentation is, Am I Doing Business Legally? What every small business owner needs to know. So we're going to get started. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I'm an Ohio native with a background in education, employment law, and corporate law. I have extensive experience providing small business owners with necessary tools to develop and enhance your businesses. So I am licensed in the state of Ohio to practice law, and I do have a Juris Doctorate. I attended law school, completed. And then I currently work in both private and public sector, and I have a variety of skill set that just involves assessing liability, looking at formation, business planning, and compliance, as well as negotiation and review. So that's just a little bit about me and my background. Okay. And so our learning objectives for this. So by the end of this session, my goal is that you'll be able to assess what business structure best fits your goals, and then also whether your current legal setup provides adequate protection. The other thing is making sure that you have awareness and understanding about contracts, intellectual property, and compliance. And then at the end, we're going to do some real world scenarios to kind of spot and problem solve just legal gaps that maybe you notice in your operations, and then also with the scenarios that we're going to do. Okay, so I did want to give a disclaimer that the materials have been prepared for general purposes only and they do not constitute legal advice. So this presentation is not intended to create or constitute an attorney-client relationship. This is merely educational. And so in the event that, you're taking information from this, definitely do so. But if you have specific scenarios or maybe contracts or patent law questions or things like that, you always want to make sure you're getting that reviewed by an attorney in your state that has like a specialty over that specific area. However, this is really to help just give you that general information and guidance about, let me think about my business and what I'm doing. Maybe this is something you haven't thought of before. Okay, so here's an overview for the presentation. So it's going to go over business entity basics. That will be our first section. So we're going to talk about what are the different types of businesses: a sole proprietorship, a partnership, an LLC, an LLP, a corporation, whether it's nonprofit, for profit. There's a lot. The other thing is contract law. You'd be surprised. Sometimes a simple conversation can form a contract. And so we're going to talk about that. The other thing is understanding intellectual property, so IP law. So that covers trademarks, patents, copyright infringement. And then we're going to finish it up with some interactive scenarios, and then we'll also do Q&A. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so business entity basics. Why do structures matter? So structures matter because taxes, that's probably one of the most popular reasons that someone has a certain type of structure for their business is, am I going to have to pay taxes personally? But then I'm also going to have to pay through my business. The other thing is liability. So when you form your business, maybe someone is then going to pursue action against your business, but then what happens if they can pursue action against you? And then the last big reason is investors and partnerships. So sometimes you start your business and you're thinking, I'm going to stay small, but then maybe you have an investor. Depending on what your legal structure is, it may not be best to have an investor, or it may not be profitable for them, or it might not make sense, and you have to make some changes. Okay. Okay, so common legal structure. So we have a sole proprietorship, partnerships, our limited liability companies, corporations, and so like S Corp, C Corps, 501(c)(3). And we'll go through those and I'll explain in more detail what those are and how they affect your business structure. Okay, so a sole proprietorship, this is going to be your simplest form of business ownership. And really, this automatically forms just by doing business. So let's say you're like, I'm going to start selling cupcakes. So you're got your recipes together, you go on Facebook and you start posting, hey guys, I'm selling cupcakes. If anyone is interested, feel free to reach out to me and place your order. In that sense, you have now formed a sole proprietorship. You, in your sense, are that business. And so, what are pros to that? It's inexpensive. There's no paperwork. You have streamlined banking because it's probably going straight from your bank account right to the customer doing those transactions. And then the other thing is you have full ownership. So it's just you. But the cons to that could be unlimited personal liability. So that means if someone eats your cupcake and gets sick, there's no protection. There's no Think of your business as like a coat to protect you from the rain. There's no protection to protect you from the rain. You're the first line of defense is just you. The other thing is those self-employment taxes. So taxes flow straight down to you. Now, it is important to note with a sole proprietorship, like I said, this can happen just from doing business. However, making sure that how do I do that if I don't have to file anything or have, like a agreement or maybe a operating agreement or something of that nature. Well, in your state, it may be required that you have a license to do business. So you don't necessarily have like your name, like Carla's Cupcakes. You don't necessarily file that, but you may file and say, I'm Carla and I do business in this state. And so there's fees associated with that, even if you're not a formal entity. So that's something that's important to know with a sole proprietorship. Okay. The next thing is a partnership. So there's all types of partnerships, general partnerships. So similar to that sole proprietorship where there's really no formal entity. You're not necessarily filing with the state. You're just working together with someone and you say, you know what, we're partners. With a partnership, a general partnership, all partners are going to share the debt. They're going to have equal liability. And it's important to think about that. So the same way we talked about the sole proprietorship with the partnership, it will leave you open to your personal assets as being a target to pay for business debts. And so that's something to think about. The other thing is a limited partnership. These are primarily where you have one general partner that has unlimited liability, meaning they are the one on the hook for those business debts. Whereas those other partners, maybe they're like a silent partner, or maybe they have just an investor capacity, they're going to have more limited liability. So you may not be able to go after their personal assets, but you could go after that general partner. So thinking of that, if you do have a limited partnership, what type of partner are you in that? And do you understand that you potentially could be liable, but other people are not? And then The last one is the limited liability partnerships. And so those are, you'll see those like LLP. Those are very favorable in the sense that they protect all the partners from liability for like negligence, malpractice, or misconduct of other partners. And this is commonly used by professionals in the sense of an accountant that has maybe a certain type of license or certification, an attorney, dentist office. You'll see a lot of those. They have LLPs. And so thinking about, okay, the partnerships, those pros we talked about. So they're simple structures, two or more people. So it's simple to form when you're like, I want to do business with this other person. You get to share those responsibilities and the workload. You're able to expand your network and your client base. But then those cons, you do share liability. So depending on your structure, if you have just a general partnership and someone puts you on the hook for maybe an automobile loan or an offer to buy something, some sort of property or product, and then now they can't pay for it, they're going to come after you too. So that liability is across both of you. The other thing too, it can be difficult to change a business structure from a partnership to something else. And that's because typically when you have a partnership, you have a partnership agreement. And if you are in a partnership and you don't have a partnership agreement, I want that to be a signal going off, in the sense of your partnership agreement is going to help detail what are our roles and responsibilities, and then how do we make decisions? What are we voting on? Who's in charge of the bank account? Who's in charge of, making sure that we're keeping track of all our expenses? So like your partnership agreement should have that in there. But then the other thing too is an exit strategy option. You need to make sure if you started something together, how are you going to end that together? And when you're working with more than one person, it can always get complicated. So that's something to think about as far as those cons that could come up with partnerships. Okay. How we doing, Karen? I'm not able to look at the chat right now. Just checking.
No questions yet. Oh,
Okay.
you're good so far.
Okay. All right. So next are our corporations. And so corporations, companies. So we have C Corps, S Corps, nonprofits, things like that. So corporations is a business, but the main distinction of why we have these different classifications is typically surrounding tax. And so the corporation is going to create a separate legal entity apart from an individual. And so, like, think of, Walmart or Target, like these big companies, they're corporations. They may C Corps or S Corps, and those distinguishing factors are whether they have shareholders and what their stock classifications are. And really, that's just how you're giving your company value. So, how do you value your company, and what does that mean for you? Do you think that you want to have investors in the future? If you want shareholders where they're going to get, a say in how you're running the company? Um, so thinking of, what are the pros of an S corp? No personal liability and high levels of privacy. So S corps are very favored for that aspect. And then some cons, though, is there's limitations on how many shareholders you can have and what types of stock. So if you have multiple people, so think about the partnerships, it's like different people, but the corporation is the entity itself, separate. And then thinking of, okay, now I want to divvy out a slice of the company to all these people. Well, when you have a company like Google or Apple and how huge it is, thinking about how are we going to get people to buy in and invest while we can still make money, but we also need to keep our shareholders happy. And so there it gets very particular. And so depending on the size of your business, you may have a preference on the S corp or a C corp. And I always encourage people, if you are thinking about doing this, you definitely want to talk to like a financial advisor, someone that is well versed in taxes, like a tax accountant, so they can really help you take a look at your financials and where you want to go with your business and how you want to operate, because that really makes a difference of should I do a C corp, should I do an S corp? And then thinking about cons, with a C corp, so there's double taxation, a lot more regulations, paperwork, and then stricter management structures. And so that's something to think about depending on what type of corporation that you have. Okay. So our next one is a nonprofit corporation, so also known as a 501(c)(3). And it's important to know too that The 501(c)(3, it's another tax designation. So being a 501(c)(3 gives you the tax exempt status. So sometimes you'll have a business and you'll say, "Oh, I'm a nonprofit." Well, to be a nonprofit, you could be a nonprofit in your state, but to get the federal tax exemption and be classified as a 501(c)(3, that's a completely separate process. So remember, you're filing with the state, but then you also go and file with the federal government to get that tax exempt status. And these are typically corporations organized to do charity work, educational work, religious or literary. And so usually it has to be for a public good and purpose. You're serving the public. They do have protection for personal liability and then tax deduction, which everyone really appreciates. Some other cons with that, though, are there's limitations on the salary. So when you have a nonprofit, again, you are supposed to be having a corporation for the public good, a public purpose. So you can't just pay yourself, I'm going to keep all the money for myself and I'm going to donate $10 a month or something. That's ridiculous. You can't do that and they will find you, and they being the government. So it's just important that you're understanding if you do have a nonprofit or are interested in a nonprofit, you really have to follow a straight, narrow line in terms of what is the purpose of this entity? Does it make sense? If you know that you need to pay yourself and have a certain amount of money, and you want to run that nonprofit, you may have to take a certain back seat depending on what your position is. You may have to change what the responsibilities are. You may have to just really take a good look at what you're doing and if it makes sense. The other thing too is nonprofits have limited control in the sense of you can't just do business with anyone or do any type of business transaction because it is monitored by the federal government to determine, are you truly a nonprofit? Like there's restrictions about donating to maybe campaigns, or if you have certain practices or other businesses that you want to work with, there could be limitations around that of how are you, transferring money or assets between a nonprofit versus a standard corporation. And then, like I said, those legal and compliance requirements, you do have to file with the federal government, and there's different types of statuses that you can have in terms of, are you like a smaller nonprofit or a bigger nonprofit? And it gets more complex the larger in size that you are to justify the amount of money that is going to be flowing through that nonprofit. Okay. So that's a bit about the different business entity structures. And so, one more, our limit liability company, our LLCs. And so this is probably the most popular. Most people have an LLC, and that's because an LLC is a separate entity from, in the sense of yourself. They have benefits like a corporation and like a partnership. You're protected from that personal liability. You get a high level of privacy, strong asset protection. And what do I mean when I say that? So, different states have different rules about LLCs and far as how many members you have and if that information is public or private. And so depending on, who you want to have a part of your company and what information you want shared, an LLC is going to give you more protection in your state for the privacy factor of that, and then also for asset protection. Some cons, though, are there's ongoing compliance requiring annual costs. So typically, you just file for your business one time and that's it. And then you usually may have to do check-ins every so many years. But there's different requirements as far as if you're going to have an LLC, there's annual filing fees. You may have to update certain documents each year. And so it just can get really time consuming, but also a lot of paperwork. And so you want to make sure that depending on your structure, do you understand what are the requirements in your state? Do you have a filing fee each year? Or do you have to update certain types of paperwork and provide certain information? If you're going to change the address of your company, you need to make sure that do you have to report that? how often do you have to do that? And so these are some of the pitfalls that people can fall into on the administrative side of picking an entity, because some entities don't require you to check in essentially with the state as much. It's more so, I did it that one time and now I'm good until I make a substantial change. But depending on the structure that you choose, there's going to be requirements each year and maybe even quarterly, depending on what type of tax liabilities you have, or if you have to report on your profit. And so it's really important to think about, what is your structure? How are you shielded from liability? Are you even shielded? And then what type of paperwork or administrative requirements are you supposed to be meeting that maybe you're not thinking about? Okay. So, like I said, what structure fits your goals? So I want you to remember that when we get to our scenario section. Okay. So asking yourself these questions when you're thinking about your business: how much personal liability are you willing to accept? So think about your personal situation. Do you own a home? Do you maybe own properties in other states? Do you have multiple vehicles? If something happens to your business, are you using those things as collateral? Did you do that willingly, or did you do it unwillingly because you set up your business incorrectly? Or maybe you didn't set up a business at all and you really didn't think about that. If something goes wrong, are you liable? Is your business a shield in a sense to protect you from that liability? And then also, how much paperwork and compliance are you willing to handle? Is that something that you're doing on your own? Do you need to hire someone to do that? And that's a lot of times we think that we can handle things ourselves, and then you realize, I actually can, and I do need a professional to come in. And so getting somebody at the beginning to take a look at your business portfolio and your structure to determine, you actually do need to toughen up and tighten everything up to get some extra help. And then also, are you able to make business decisions freely? Are you in a partnership where one partner has more voting power? Or maybe it's equal. And in the beginning, you thought, well, we're in a partnership, it's 50-50. Well, what happens when that partner goes and obligates you to perform a contract that you don't want to do? Or maybe you already have something booked. And so now you have to figure out, how are we going to make this happen? Were you able to freely make that decision, or did someone make it for you? Okay. Um, okay, so common mistakes. Common mistakes we can take a look at is just forming no business at all, overlooking long-term plans. So maybe you started off as a nonprofit and now you're thinking, I actually have this product I want to sell, and I think this will be great, but I only have my nonprofit. How is that going to help you? Is that even a possibility? Or and sometimes you can transfer your entity from one to another. So maybe if you have a sole proprietorship, you're now, okay, I'm going to enter into and create an LLC. But with some, you can't go backwards. You can't make that transfer. You have to start over. And so understanding that. And then if you're only looking at short-term tax benefits, so what are the pros and cons right now, but when you see yourself in 5 years and where you're growing and heading with your business, maybe that doesn't make sense. The other thing is, ignoring administrative requirements we talked about, if you have annual filing requirements or quarterly requirements. And the other thing really important is not signing contracts and not understanding intellectual property law. And so that's what we're going to talk about for the remaining time of the presentation. So I just want you to think about, what is your current structure? Are you exposed to liability? Are you freely able to make certain decisions, or do you need approval from someone else? And then how is that going to influence when you're entering into contracts, when you're creating products that maybe need protection with a copyright or a patent? Have you thought about that and what you need to do? Okay. So,
Marissa, I just noticed that we have a timing on this that looks like 8 minutes remaining on our meeting.
yes.
I think it's so, just to keep that in mind. Just I noticed it counting down on my corner, so keep going. But
Okay,
just
gotcha.
yep.
Okay. Okay, so contracts. Why business contracts matter for you? Okay. So creating a contract, let's think about how our contracts created. So some people don't realize, but you can create a contract orally. Some people think, oh, well, I didn't sign anything. That doesn't mean anything. That's not true. If you make an offer and someone accepts that and they provide what's called consideration, which is they put something on the line. So it could be a deposit, or maybe they forfeited another opportunity to agree to do something for you, and then you both are in agreement on that, that can be a contract. And the courts will look at that as so, like, did they detrimentally rely on your promise to do something or to not do something? And did it cost them either an opportunity to do business, or did it cost them money or their time? And so, oral contracts, I'm sure we do them often. They're quick, they're convenient, you don't have to do any paperwork. But nothing is better than a written contract. And that could be something as simple as, let's say you have a conversation with someone and you say, yes, I would love to have you come to my shop and place this order for these t-shirts. And I'm going to push my other contract aside tomorrow so that you can come by. I'm going to expedite this for you. And you say, great, I appreciate it. We're going to take care of that. So then something as simple as even sending a quick text or email to follow up. Hey, just a reminder, thank you so much again for agreeing to buy my product. Like I said, I pushed somebody out and I'm going to replace you so that way you can come in and do this contract. And then the next day comes, they don't show up. You now missed out on that other business opportunity. This person didn't show up. You're out of time and money. What can you do? If you never exchange anything in writing, it's going to be so much more difficult for you to prove that you entered into a contract with that person. Contracts set and define expectations clearly. They're going to protect your interests and they create enforceable obligations. And so, like I said, having something in writing is super important. So, common contracts, a service agreement. If you're going to provide services for someone, you're going to detail what those services are. You're going to have important terms in there, like the date, the time, the value of it. What is it? What is it not? NDAs, if you're exchanging information with someone and talking to them about, this is special information about how we operate and do our business, or what is in our recipe, or how we create a product, you probably want an NDA. Other thing is non-solicit. If you're working with someone, this happens a lot in sales. Maybe someone is working for you and helping sell a product for you in your business. They have your list of clients, they have so much information, but then they leave. And then they take that information with them. And now you see them, hey, they're selling to my clients. I used to provide those services. I don't understand. Did you have a non-solicit agreement in place? Other thing is independent contractor agreements. If you're working with someone, they're providing a service, maybe just for that one time, but they're doing it all themselves, but it's your event, it's your company. You're going to want to have an agreement with them so you can outline those terms, because if they mess something up, you want them to be liable and not you. And then we also mentioned earlier, partnership agreements. If you're working with more than one person to conduct your business, they're your partner if they're doing the day-to-day operations. Oh, don't worry, I'll take care of this today and you focus on that tomorrow. Is it changing day to day, or do you want that to be, no, I want this to be the way it is all the time? And then operating agreements. That really details what is your business and what does it do? What is it supposed to do? That's helpful to establish that you actually have a legitimate business. And oftentimes when you go maybe to the bank or to apply for a grant, credit, loans, they want to see, do you have a partnership agreement? Do you have an operating agreement? How do we know that your business is legitimate? And so always remember that having contracts legitimizes your business. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I have a business, I do business. And then when it's time to look at the paperwork, they don't have any. And so you want to make sure that when you walk into a room, you can establish and enforce the fact that you are a legitimate business owner. You have contracts in place to protect yourself, but also to legitimize the services that you're providing or the products that you're selling. Okay, so some common red flags in contracts. So we want to think about vague language. Is it one-sided? Are there hidden fees or penalties? What happens if you get into a disagreement? Do you have a dispute resolution clause? Maybe you want to arbitrate, which is separate from court. It's like a more informal setting, but the outcomes are legally binding. Or maybe there's missing information. There's no data about, well, what time were we supposed to do this? What date? How long is this a duration? Is it repetitive? And so those are things to look out. If you're signing a contract or entering into a contract with someone, is there information missing that later is going to hurt you? Okay, so intellectual property. So these are trademarks, patents, copyright. So understanding intellectual property. This is like the intangible value that your business creates. So that's your business name, your logo, your products, your inventions, your content. Copyrights, patents, trademarks, trade secrets. These are all types of IP. Now, intellectual property law is very specific. And it is very important that if you are going to get something copyrighted or get a patent or a trademark, you want to make sure that you're looking at your state level requirements. And then depending on how broad your business is, and if a lot, especially if you're doing a lot of work online, it's going to have federal implications as well.
It looks like we have a minute and a half just to kind of wrap this up. Somehow this meeting had a timing on it. So I don't know if you want to ask her questions or keep rolling through, but you got a minute and a half. So, or a minute now, just to
Okay.
close it up.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. We can add, if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to answer as quick as I can. And then I'm
Do you
going
want to
to go
scroll
to the
through to
end
get
to
to
give
the,
you our
yes,
link. Yes.
yes.
So if you look at this QR code here, you can go straight here and request information and services. And then also we have a link here too. I don't know, Karen, if you can drop it in the
Yep.
chat.
Yep, I will drop this in the chat real quick. This link is the one, if I can do it real quick, but if you can take a quick picture of that, if I have time here. This goes to the Nevada SBDC group for the SSBCI money. So if you guys need any assistance, it's free of charge to talk to Marissa or somebody else on our team or the SBDC's team to get some of these questions answered. So I know we're running out of time, and hopefully you guys got a chance to look at that. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you, Marissa. If you want to close it up real quick.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you and talk to you. And we have a multitude of specialists. Just want to make sure you guys are protected and thinking about your businesses. So thank you so much for being here today.